Hello everyone and welcome to week 1 of Soc 1101, Law, Crime and Punishment. We begin this course with a prologue. Prologue, essentially, the opening of a story that establishes the setting and provides background details. And the story we'll be delving into this semester is the story of law, crime, and punishment in the U.S. And this prologue focuses on what it means to examine law, crime, and punishment from a sociological perspective. In other words, it introduces you to the spirit of the course. Now, this is a course in sociology, that is, the sociology of law, crime, and punishment, which begs the question, what is sociology? Well, sociology is a lot of things. One way to think about it is as a perspective with which to examine and view the social world. It is also a spirit, which, once internalized, is a spirit you will carry with you every single moment of your life. It is a spirit according to which nothing is taken for granted and everything, including everything, is questioned and up for debate. Everything. The sociological spirit could also be described as an alternative way to make sense of social reality. Alternative in the sense that it is contrary to our commonsensical, taken for granted understanding of the world. For instance, a classic example is this famous line from the Communist Manifesto. The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. Which is basically saying, well, you might think that you live in a thriving democracy. However, it is only a facade, a lie. This thing you call a democracy is actually a very clever way to make it seem like you, the people, are in charge. However, in reality, it is the owners of the means of production, the very few billionaires in this country, who are actually the ones running the show. An extension of this argument is one made by comedian George Carlin in his skit on education. Carlin begins with the age-old question, why does it seem like education always sucks? And his answer, well folks, you're really approaching this issue the wrong way. Then he states, there's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. Because the owners of this country don't want that. Now, I'm talking about the real owners now. Forget the politicians. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. Now, I want you to keep in mind that both this and the previous example are not about whether or not the arguments are true or correct or accurate, or whether you should agree with these arguments or not. That is not the point. The point is about questioning everything and opening up our minds. It's about being willing to consider different views about the world, being willing to consider different perspectives and different ways to understand it. There is yet another way to describe this elusive sociological spirit. It is the fifth story from David Foster Wallace's famous 2005 Kenyon College commencement speech, which you listened to this week. And it goes this way. There are these two young fish swimming along, and they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys, how's the water?" And the two young fish swim on for a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell's water?" And the point of this story, as David Foster Wallace puts it later in the speech, that the most obvious, important realities are often the ones that are hardest to see and talk about. Now, another and probably one of the most important features of the sociological perspective or imagination or spirit is its focus on the ubiquitous tension between structure and agency. Structure and agency. It is a tension that can also be described as one between constraint and choice, or between a world where things happen to people and a world where people do things. It is, in short, the age-old tension between our freedom as human beings to think and act independently, that is agency, and the constraints placed on us by the norms, rules, and laws that govern and organize human societies, that is structure. This tension is also the topic around which this week's text is centered. We read the first few pages from Patricia Ewick and Susan Silby's The Commonplace of Law, which is a seminal text in the sociology of law. Please read this text carefully and keep in mind that sociological spirit we discussed earlier in this presentation. Furthermore, this text will serve as the basis for our final podcast assignment, so pay close attention to the objectives and spirit of this book. We will read much more of it later in the course. So to conclude with the words of the authors themselves, this book attempts to map and understand this variety of law's presence in everyday life. Using stories and accounts of everyday people, we describe how Americans interpret and make sense of the law. So keep in mind the focus on everyday life, on everyday people, and of the law. That is it for this week. I hope that it was an interesting and joyful introduction to the course, and we'll be back next week with much, much more. Thank you.